What's going on, everybody? Tom here with Black Sheep Keto, and welcome to another video just for you subscribers out there. And if you're not a subscriber yet, please consider doing so. Now today, everybody, I wanted to talk about how I do the keto diet, because the keto diet can be done in so many different ways, and all of them work in their own ways and work differently for different people. But, you know, my opinions have changed a lot over the years. I used to be that person that was strict, cared about every single ingredient, almost stopped taking some of my asthma medication because I didn't like that it had maltodextrin in it, things like that. Versus where I am today over the course of educating myself, doing experiments on myself, my friends, people that I coach, things like that. And I think I've come to this point where the diet that I currently follow is incredibly effective and very sustainable. And I've been doing it for about a year and a half now, and I've done both bulks and cuts this way, and it all works great. So you guys are probably thinking, all right, Tom, just get to the point. So my style of keto is based around the definition of a keto diet. Now, depending on where you look, you're going to get varying definitions, but the gist of it is typically it's a high-fat, adequate protein, low-carbohydrate diet that forces the bodies to burn fats instead of carbohydrates. That's it. So basically the definition of a keto diet is saying, hey, you need to be in ketosis. That's awesome. But there's this huge thing that goes on in the keto industry where a lot of things that people choose to avoid for other reasons get conflated into the idea of a keto diet. And some people say, oh, that's not keto because it's got GMOs in it or things like that. But through my style of keto, it doesn't matter. It has no impact on ketosis. So what does have an impact on ketosis? Well, realistically, it's just things with a high glycemic index value. And as far as I'm concerned, I do the best that I possibly can with that. Now, if something blatantly has sugar in it, I look at it like, that's not really a keto product. Could it be keto friendly, meaning you can make it work? Certainly. Is a gram of sugar going to knock you out of ketosis? Absolutely not. But then you start playing this game where it's like, okay, if I have 5 things that have a little bit of sugar in it, does it add up? And it kind of becomes a slippery slope there. So anything that has a high glycemic index, sweetener, flour, starches, whatever, anything that's got high glycemic index values, I try to avoid on a keto diet. And that even includes things like xylitol. Is it okay for keto? Sure, but it's got a mid-teens glycemic index, and realistically, there are better choices out there. So will I use it? Maybe. Is it my first choice? No. So that's kind of where I stand on these things. The only thing I care about is the glycemic index of the ingredients. Now, again, some people will say, well, what about the glycemic load? Which is basically just calculated using the glycemic index compared to how much of it is in there. And the problem is, and the reason that I don't find that to be a reliable thing to track, is because you really don't know on commercial products. The ingredient label is obviously in descending order from the highest concentration to the least concentration, but it doesn't give you a specific number of grams. So those calculations can be kind of hard to make, and you're really just guessing at that point. So to make it easier on myself, I just look at it and say, hey, do any of these ingredients have a high glycemic index value? If yes, then I'm probably not going to eat it. If no, then hey, it's perfectly keto. And yes, guys, there are those category of keto-friendly products where it's kind of right there in the middle, but just kind of do you with those. Play it at your own risk and see how it affects your body. So now that we kind of have that out of the way, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the hypocrisies that I see in the keto industry, because these things really get pushed into a general keto diet, and people legitimately believe that, oh, well, this isn't keto because X, Y, Z, and that's just quite frankly not true. Big one is GMOs, right? I've seen it all over the place. Oh, well, this can't be keto because it's got genetic modification. How does that affect ketosis? It doesn't. So for a general keto diet, that's totally fine. Now, obviously, depending on the person, you've got different medical needs. I'm not saying don't follow what your doctor says in terms of your medical needs. I'm just saying if you're like me and you did this for weight loss, someone who used to be morbidly obese, limiting myself even further based on something that has no impact on the diet doesn't seem like very helpful. And a lot of the people that I coach are morbidly obese as well. And that's kind of where this comes from, as the how do I make this sustainable and the average person can follow without feeling too restricted. Eliminating anything that's genetically modified doesn't sound like the option to kind of give us a lot of variety, especially in the case where it does not affect ketosis at all. Other things, guys, occasionally I'll use black soybeans. They're fantastic for making like refried beans, baked beans, stuff like that. And I don't necessarily want to break ketosis because I feel really fat and kind of bloated. My head gets kind of foggy when I break ketosis. So if I want those type of bean things, I'll use a black soybean. That's something that like the whole keto industry demonizes for some reason. And we've had this conversation before, but in mild concentrations, it's really not that bad for you. Some people will say, oh, well, what about the phytoestrogens? And my argument to that would be, There's phytoestrogens in flaxseed as well, but that is totally widely accepted in the keto industry. Then the next argument will probably be, oh, what about the lectin? It's an anti-nutrient. Yeah, that also exists in almonds and tomatoes. Let me specify the skin of an almond. So if you're eating like blanched almonds, not so much true, but regular almonds, it's there as well. Again, both of those things are accepted on a keto diet. So there seems to be a bit of demonization and hypocrisy here that we can't really seem to get around. Now again, am I saying you should just eat blocks of soy all day long? No, but a little bit of it here and there, it's not gonna hurt you. Or I should say, it's not going to hurt your ketogenic diet. If it's gonna hurt you for other reasons, obviously don't eat it. But for the purposes of ketosis, it's not gonna do anything. The black soybean is basically all fiber, they taste great, and you know what, I'm gonna make my baked beans and refried beans out of it, and it's not gonna hurt ketosis at all. Another thing I see is like sometimes companies will add gluten to a product and people are like, well, the keto diet has to be gluten-free. Not really. It's kind of just accidentally gluten-free because a lot of the things that have gluten in them are like super high carb items and we just naturally avoid those on a keto diet. But extracting gluten and using it in like production of another product, it's not going to affect ketosis really. So, you know, I don't have a problem with it. Personally, I don't really find those products too often, but I've seen it come up a couple times in conversation. Again, my opinion on that is, well, it doesn't affect ketosis, so it doesn't matter. But then on the other side of things, where you get people who are like super restrictive on that, you'll also see like products that are accepted as keto that have totally non-keto ingredients in them. One of the biggest ones that I see is Alterna Sweets barbecue sauce, right? That thing's like all over the keto expos, and don't get me wrong, this stuff's awesome, but if you want to get like strict keto here and throw a fit about things like soy and GMOs and blah, 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 how is it that people accept that when there is blackstrap molasses in there? Now, obviously, blackstrap molasses is not the worst sweetener that could have been used, but let's be honest here. It's a higher glycemic index sweetener, and there's better options out there. But that's accepted, and maybe that's just through the use of, you know, influencers that have decided that they like the product. I'm not really sure how that happens, but my point here is that you can't really just go off of what everybody says and accept that as the truth. You have to understand why people are saying that and see if you can find counter arguments. Kind of like, you know, with the whole, oh, that gives you cancer argument. Well, you can give me any ingredient you want and I could probably find you a study that says it causes cancer. That's just the way things are. There are studies for everything. Some will say one thing, some will say another. It's just a matter of what you personally buy into. So this is not my attempt to like take down the keto industry or anything like that, but I am Black Sheep Keto. I chose that name for a reason, and I chose it because I don't do what everybody else does. For me personally, guys, again, I went from being morbidly obese, and then I followed a super strict keto diet where every little thing mattered. I mean, I remember getting into fights with people on forums. Like, I was that guy. And to be honest with you, I didn't get any more out of that than I do from what I do currently. Obviously, what I do currently, it's a lot easier for me to maintain. It's just as effective. I mean, I would say 95% is effective. So you have a law of diminishing returns that occurs here, but I'd rather choose something that's sustainable, that is very effective, versus something that is not sustainable, that is incredibly effective. Does that make sense? If I can do this for a long period of time, that 95% of optimal is going to be much more efficient than trying to get that 99.99% of optimal, but you can only do it for a few weeks before you lose your mind. And that's another thing, guys. Cheat days. Man, you see like huge fights about this as well. Do you need a cheat day on keto? Absolutely not. Not required. But through my experiments and the people that I coach, God, doing it, you know, every couple months, maybe once a month, it's just good for the soul, man. Like, mental health is so important. And what I always tell the people that I coach is have a notepad. And anytime you're like really craving some food that you're like, God, I can't get over this craving, write it down. And that kind of helps them go, all right, well, on my next cheat day in a month or whatever, I can have that food. And eventually they get to that point where it's like they look at that list come that cheat day and maybe choose one or two things that actually sound good at that point. But it helps them mentally. And when you're, you know, morbidly obese, 300, 400, 500 pounds, that mental health really does help you, and that kind of keeping a focus on what you're doing and knowing that, okay, I can't have this today, but I can have this, you know, on X day if I really want it, that helps a lot. So you do have some people that are pretty liberal on things like Logan Delgado, Goody Beats. He openly admits to having cheat days from time to time. But then you get guys like Rob and Crystal at Keto Savage, and they're performance athletes. They can't mess around like that, and to my knowledge, at least I've never seen them post anything where they do. But the idea there is like they have a different goal. My goal is, you know, I'm a software engineer. I need to keep my brain working well. I like lifting heavy things for fun, but I don't really do it competitively, and I don't want to get fat again. So those are kind of my goals, and my goals fall more in line with that more liberal style of keto where it's like, okay, as long as I'm maintaining ketosis and I'm not gaining weight, and I generally feel good, my mental clarity's there, then hey, this is the perfect diet for me. Obviously, this must change if you're wanting to be competing at the pro levels with powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever. But for most of us, that's not the case. And then you run into like the slippery slope clause a little bit, and there are other influencers that I know kind of fall into this category where they just don't have anything that they shouldn't because they kind of run down this slippery slope, and suddenly it's just like a whole bender. And that's totally cool too. I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying for the average person, these crazy restrictions that you see on keto diets kind of are unnecessary. At the end of the day, there's kind of this conflicting arguments, but for me, that is what I do. Call it whatever you want. I wouldn't call it dirty keto because I actually do care about the ingredients. I'm looking for a low glycemic index. I really try to avoid things like sugar and, I don't know, high glycemic index starches. I try to avoid those things. In a dirty keto diet, those would be acceptable as long as the general carb count was low. But for me, I try to avoid that because in concentrations and as they add up over the day, it can make a difference, and I'm just not gonna play that game. So hopefully that was not too long-winded and confusing, but I just wanted to take the moment here to tell you guys where I stand on keto, the reasons that I stand where I do, and if anybody wants to like discuss things, like I'm totally open to having like logical and intelligent conversations in the comment section. But again, any people who are just being generally rude and aggressive are just gonna get banned. I really don't care. At the end of the day, like this is a place for people to learn, a place for people to try out new things and try to better themselves, and having negativity does not help that. So that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and close out the video. If you like this video, leave it a like. If you have any questions or comments for me, leave them down in the comment section. And if you have not subscribed yet, do me a huge favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button, show us some love, and I will see you in the next one.